Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Lodestar's Lending Leaders. We have a special guest today, George Baker. He is president of Talkuments LLC, a company that helps people comply with the limited English proficiency regulations by Fannie and Freddie, and really just helps you grow your business. At the end of the day, he's going to describe this a lot better than me, but really excited to have a conversation. The LEP guidelines were something that I knew nothing about before we spoke. So really excited to dive into it. I think it's something that's going to be really pertinent for a lot of folks listening today. So George, thanks for joining.
It's my pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about Talkuments, kind of what led you to start the company and what got you into the mortgage industry, I guess, even before that.
Yeah, so I have been in the mortgage industry for a lot of years, over 3 decades, and basically towards the end, my experience culminated with running call centers. So our call center was in about 34 states, and one of the disadvantages that you have running a call center, of course, is that you don't have the opportunity to meet people face to face. So we had to come up with digital media that helped compensate for that particular negative. So what we did was we came up with our proprietary version of Talkuments, which accompanied LOs, and it helped to express different mortgage terms, conditions, paperwork, and things of that nature associated with the mortgage loan. And it was a wonderful way to originate a loan, because what happened was that we actually gained a great following because people simply understood. For the first time, they really understood. And in addition to that, what we were doing along with the loan originator was we were building comfort and trust, which are the 2 most important things in any sales process, by providing digital aids as the loan was either being originated or, most importantly, as the loan was being processed and then closed. So a brief example, this goes back to the HUD settlement days. Many times people just didn't understand the HUD settlement statement, actually most of the time. So if you, for example, were doing a refinance or no closing cost refinance, people were always suspicious. So what we did was we provided a digital tutorial as to their specific HUD settlement statement. So when they went to the closing table, they understood exactly what they were looking at. So it was just a great way, again, of getting loans and keeping loans. And that's where the idea of Talkuments was born. So by definition, we created a product which is a step-by-step digital home loan guide. So what we do is we provide transactional clarity to the 150 plus pieces of paper that we ask people to read, review, and sign, which all of us in the mortgage industry know that nobody gets and nobody signs. It's just robo-signing left and right, and it happens all the time. So by providing this transactional clarity, by using these digital tools, these suite of digital tools, again, it's just a great way of doing business. It's a great way of branding a company. It's a great way of branding a loan originator. And then what we did was we add languages to it because our demographics in the United States are changing. So the combination of the languages being helpful with respect to future loan originations, along with the opportunity to help native English speakers understand the mortgage process and the terms and conditions of the loan, just seemed to be a really good combination.
I appreciate the mention of the HUD. I actually got my start with Lodestar in 2010 when they were adding the 4th and 5th pages to the HUD form. So, and I think with the exception of my dad, who's an attorney for 42 years, and he waxes poetic about how easy the HUD was to understand. I don't think anyone else really misses that form at the end of the day. So I appreciate kind of the callback there. And I like the distinction too of folks who maybe they are native English speakers, but this is still a confusing process, right? Is there a particular step that you find causes the most confusion, or is it just a little bit of everything?
I think it's a little bit of everything. So generally what I have found, and these are guesstimates on my part based on our monthly surveys, was 20% of folks out there are capable of just reading the paperwork and they're fine. There's another 20% that just don't care. It's just, where do I sign? You're going to give me a loan? Okay, where do I sign? And we're really now dealing with like 55 to 60% of people that really do have an interest in understanding what's going on. The problem with the mortgage industry is that we are slow to change. We are slow to adopt technology, which makes us rather unique. And people really do want to understand what's going on. We just don't provide the tools to facilitate that. The only source of reliable information and reference for a mortgage loan applicant is the loan originator. And, by and large, loan originators are hardworking, good people, honest people. But that's from a regulatory perspective, we kind of bring regulations upon ourselves, not recognizing that from a regulator's perspective, if the only source of information, reliable source of information, because people don't understand the paperwork, is the LO, that's kind of like the fox being in charge of the hen house. So it doesn't make much sense to have that kind of a situation when technology really solves problems. And ultimately, from my perspective, multilingual, digital, step-by-step home loan guide type of technology, one of its main benefits is really a regulatory aspect, not just meeting the regulations, but helping to defer regulations or penalties associated with infractions that we might have.
I like the fox running the hen house analogy. I mean, you're talking to the person who has one of the most to gain out of closing the mortgage is actually the one who has to explain everything going forward. The thing
Jim,
I really
excuse me for one second. Now think about a Hispanic borrower who is not a native English speaker. Okay, so English speakers don't understand the documents. We're now going to give it to a non-native English speaker, and we're going to ask him to understand the documents. There again is more of a presence on a loan originator to provide clarity in that kind of a situation. So.
Well, and then if that clarity is not provided, what's the downside, right? If someone needs a mortgage, right? So they're going to go talk to you. If it's too confusing, will they just go to the next mortgage person? Will they not get a mortgage? What does it look like when you're not able to do that?
So the way that we position Talkuments is that it really is a business opportunity. There's the compliance side. I'm not a compliance person. So with compliance, it was one of those deals that was just a pain in the backside and you just have to put up with it, do what you're told, that kind of stuff. For me, it was all about originating loans. And that's what it is in the mortgage business. We're in a really competitive industry. Just a fraction of an interest rate or just a couple of dollars could swing the difference. So what we're all looking for is a slight competitive advantage to help us as we try to originate more loans than our competitor. So the opportunity to provide what I call an educational sell to a loan applicant really carried a lot of weight. There's an old saying, the more you tell, the more you sell. So for those people that really had an interest in understanding things, and by using digital tools which make it very simple to understand, terms, fees, parameters, features, benefits, those types of things, by using those kinds of tools, lenders just look different. And most importantly, they look more professional. So we have a common situation where here's 150 pieces of paper. Go ask your LO if you got a couple of questions. Or we have 150 pieces of paper, and here's a step-by-step guide that's going to answer the majority of the questions that you have. And if you still have questions, just click this button and ask your LO to explain what you don't understand. So it's technology working with human capacity to really achieve the best consumer experience. And that's another thing. We lenders talk about consumer experience being one of our top priorities. Most recent survey, it was number 2. Number 1 was keeping a hold of our employees, but number 2 was improving the consumer experience. We talk about it a lot, but we really don't make, in my opinion, large steps towards fulfilling that particular promise. It's funny, other industries, as they try to gain customers, what they do is anything that the customer wants. They'll speak in the manner that the customer wishes to be spoken to. They'll give information in the manner that the customer wishes to receive it. But in the mortgage industry, we don't do that. Here it is. This is how we do business. You adapt to us. So it's kind of strange. And that's obviously part of our regulatory framework. We provide legally efficient paperwork that covers our backsides, but it's just missing that really crucial component, Jim. And it's a business factor. The more you tell, the more you sell. If you can make somebody feel comfortable with this process, which for many folks is a complicated one, you're simply going to get business. You're going to get more business, referrals, and word of mouth referrals.
A saying I say a lot, which is the flip side of that, is the confused don't buy.
I have to use that. I'm going to steal that.
Now we'll trade some sayings. But again, like if you're confused, I'm just going to walk out. I don't understand this. I'm not comfortable.
Right.
I'll figure it out later. The confused don't buy. So
I like that.
The thing that we talk a lot here too is, this is a relationship business and a technology business. So the folks who do really well, we had Kevin Peranio on here last season from PRMG, and he really talked a lot about using technology to leverage what an LO can do. Right. So now I'm not on the phone with you saying, hey, what's your credit score? What's the address? Okay, what's your job? What's your income? What's your car payment? That's not a high touch point, right? I'd rather say, hey, George, how can we help you? Or what does this refinance mean to you? Or actually talking about something that builds a relationship. So now you're using technology to then help build that relationship. I feel like a lot of title companies, a lot of mortgage companies, you're trying to find a market. So, hey, who at our company speaks Spanish? They're in charge of Spanish stuff. We're set, right? And
That's correct.
Not in your head. So I assume that you see a lot of people do that and probably fall flat.
Yeah, Jim, Key, if I can just rewind the clock just a little bit, because you said something that was really important. I remember a conversation with the largest depository loan originator in the United States. And they had a fleet of people that were answering problems associated with mortgage originations. And the person that was in charge of that particular division said to me that if you really narrow down 80% of the complaints that they had to handle, it came down to one word, and that one word was miscommunications. And this is what we're trying to solve. This is what we're trying to address. Not only is a digital guide good for loan originations by removing confusion, but it also really lowers support costs with respect to complaints, concerns, and those types of things that will naturally occur no matter what mortgage company you're with.
One of the things that we have a product mortgage sentinel that conducts fallout surveys. So we see why borrowers don't sign with a particular lender. Do they go with someone else? Do they just not qualify? In whatever case, what happens? And one of the things that's interesting is about 70% of the folks that a lender runs credit on don't close with them, right? So that's a lot of people you're doing some sort of work for that you're not realizing any revenue.
Right.
And even if you can tilt that up a few percentage points by miscommunication, lack of confusion, limiting any of that, it really helps to close that gap. Yeah. One question I had for you too is, as the market's getting more competitive, as the home buyer demographics are changing, I'm sure a lot of people come to you and say, hey, there's X community in where we do business, and I really want to kind of break in and do business there. So how do I start selling to them, to the Vietnamese community in my state? Let me hire a Vietnamese speaking LO. What else can we do, right? So how do you find lenders who do something like that well, approaching it?
So Jim, that's a great question. So let me just tackle the part I don't like that much, but just to get it out of the way, the regulatory issues associated with originating loans with non-native English speakers. So currently, as we speak right now, there's 31 states that either have limited English proficiency laws that state that if you speak to someone in a language other than English, you have to provide either the contract documents in the language that was spoken or the TILA documents. And then there's a whole bunch of states that have what are called unconscionability standards. Now, what that means is that if you knowingly engage in a situation where you have somebody sign an agreement knowing that they don't understand the agreement, that's a violation of the unconscionability laws or standards of that particular state. So using your example, when a person wants to appeal to a particular online segment, let's say a community that speaks Vietnamese, what most mortgage lenders do right now is, as you said, they'll go out and they'll hire a Vietnamese loan originator. That Vietnamese loan originator will then deal with the community based on his service, based on interest rates, other types of factors. He will hopefully cultivate a following in that community. So that's typically how it's done. The problem with that particular arrangement is twofold. Depending upon what state they're originating loans in, they possibly are violating these LEP laws. I kind of call it driving a car with faulty brakes. Eventually, these lenders are going to crash because not only with our example is that done, it's done everywhere. And the reason that lenders simply hire multilingual LOs to originate loans from different cultural groups is because it's the easiest thing to do, and it's very difficult to comply with these unconscionability standards or these LEP standards. And regulators, by the way, don't really catch them. So if a regulator was to look at a loan and it says Jose Martinez is the borrower, how does that regulator know that that person couldn't speak English very well? He doesn't, right? So we're lenders either by default with respect to pursuit of business or by default by not having a readily available solution are truly violating these particular standards all the way across. Now, when you throw also in there some of the federal regulations that possibly can be coming out, the first one is a bill called HR 3009. It's going to require lenders to provide resources in 8 languages, and then 3 years after enactment, 4 more languages will come on board. And the 9 priorities that CFPB put forth, one of the 9 was limited English proficiencies or us lenders addressing people in languages, right? So there's the compliance side. But the other problem that we have is everybody knows that more and more business is going online. So you've got the backdrop of these 31 states that have these regulatory requirements. You've got the backdrop of possible federal requirements. You've got the backdrop of people not complying with the requirements. And then you've got more and more business going online, which necessitates you talking to that applicant in that language. And that's where the problem occurs. So it's kind of funny. If you go to a bank teller and you go to take money out, language selections come up. If you call somebody, press 2 for Spanish. That's not the case in the mortgage industry. We're English, 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 even though we do business in all these other languages. And the reason that we're like that, and the reason that you don't notably see other languages is because of these regulations. And if a person or a lender was to actually advertise those regulations, then they're kind of putting a bullseye on their back. And by putting the bullseye now, when a regulator comes in and reviews their websites, their marketing material, they see, oh, Vietnamese. So what are you doing for limited English proficiency Vietnamese folks? So all I'm saying is that you've got, again, compliance, but as you look at the future and you think about lending really being a vehicle which is associated with online activities, you know, the lenders that really will do well in this particular language development are the ones that figure out how to be able to put languages, again, on their website to talk to people in a standardized and consistent way in their language. And they're the ones that are going to originate the most loans, be it from a Vietnamese community, a Hispanic community, a Chinese community, or many others, obviously with respect to the United States.
So what I'm hearing is beyond just hiring someone who can Thank you for listening to Lodestar's Landing Leaders. I'd like to give a special thanks to Brian Rieger and Elena Gardner, who help us create this podcast.